You've reached Monster 911, and I'm Lance Hightower. I've been taking cryptid emergency calls for over 5 years. If you have a cryptid emergency, please call our toll-free number 866-306-8085. I can help you. What's your emergency? Hello everyone, and welcome back. It's so good to have you tuning in once again to Monster 911. I'm Lance Hightower, your podcast host, cryptid therapist, as well as in-the-field investigator to the unexplainable, the terrifying, the very real presence of living and breathing monsters in the woods all across America. And if you're not a subscriber yet, then please hit that subscribe button right now. Otherwise, you'll miss out on something you'll absolutely need to know and need to learn regarding these true creature encounter interviews. And if you've been witness to something that was indescribable, something that kind of made you shake in your shoes a bit, then you really should share what happened to you or what you experienced. I'll understand. I've had my own experiences. I know it's tough. Trust me, I do. I 100% understand. You can call me toll-free anytime at 1-866-306-8085, 24/7, 365. I'll usually respond within 24 hours or less. Also, do you want to be the really cool dad, mom, aunt, uncle, brother, sister, or grandparent? Well, I'm going to help you here. I'm serious. You can. By ordering your Monster 911 t-shirt today, and just click on the link on the website below at www.monster911.com. Go to the store and grab some tees for you guys. You'll love them. The kids love them. So do that today, and that way you can have it if you go to a conference or whatever. I've got people ordering them, so go there and grab some tees today, guys. We're going to have some really cool merch coming as well. Also, here soon we'll be re-releasing some shows in a special format. It's a multi-series of exclusive shows, and with each series of shows, we're going to release a show each day. Yes, you heard that correct, each day. So Series 1 will be War with Dogman. Series 2, the Kansas Bigfoot. Series 3, a Texas Ranger told me we know Bigfoot exists but never tell. Series 4, Family Sees Werewolf in Town. And Series 5, Guy in Ghillie Suit. No way. So stay tuned for more details, guys. You're not going to want to miss out on this. So let's go to this show for today, guys. Tonight's show is slightly different because we got a double bill of Dogman encounters narrated by yours truly, Lance. Both were sent in to me by some listeners who wanted to remain anonymous and did not want to appear on the show. And of course, I was happy to oblige them and narrate their encounter stories myself, as I always am. And just a reminder, if you're in a similar situation where you'd like to have a conversation about an encounter you had but aren't really prepared to appear on the show as a guest, we can still feature your story with your permission. Just get in touch with me via our toll-free number, 1-866-306-8085, or email us at www.monster911.com and click on the contact at the top of the menu bar, and you're able to leave me an email that way. Now, sit back. I want you to take a listen to these next stories of Dogman encounters in rural America. So, it starts out, this is a story just told me last week. I had completely forgot about this. This happened to my husband a few years back around, let's say 4 or 5 years ago. We live in southeast Louisiana between Lake Pontchartrain, a marshy area, wooded area, and Honey Island Swamp, in the area where I-12, I-10, and I-59 connect. There is a spur train track about a quarter mile or so from our house. This spur track used to run along Highway 190 on the north side of Lake Pontchartrain. Now, that part of the spur track, which runs along the side of Highway 190, has been ripped up and turned into a bike and jogging path. It's called Tammany Trace, St. Tammany Trace. The track by our area is still out there, but overgrown with tall grass. This spur track connects the main track, which runs from Louisiana to Mississippi. Going to the state line between Louisiana and Mississippi, the train tracks run along I-59, which both run through train tracks. I-59 and Honey Island Swamp all connect together. So, okay, one night, my husband had run to the store for something. He was in his old 1999 Dodge Standard pickup truck. As he came to a stop, just a habit of doing so, about 4 to 6 feet in front of the spur track, a big black dog, very big, he said, jumped over the 2-lane road in front of his truck. The height of the jump was over the hood of his truck, he said. He could make out that this creature was definitely big and black, that the head of the creature was looking forward. It did not look at him. He was like, that is the biggest black dog I'd ever seen. And he was amazed how high and how far it jumped. The next day he drove around our neighbors to see who owned a big black dog like that. Our neighborhood has 3 main streets and 2 cross streets with no drive through it. No one in the area owned a dog that size. We knew about Bigfoots, but had no clue about these dogmen until we started listening to your YouTube show. He had forgotten all about this until we started hearing dogs barking around 2 or 3 in the morning. Then we kind of figured that the dog that my husband had seen was more than likely and possibly a dogman creature because of its size and how high it jumped. P.S. This creature was running in the direction of the Honey Island Swamp. So, this was a short encounter story here, but, what's interesting about this story when I read this is there was, and I may have said this before, but I have a very good friend here in town, and his wife's mother doesn't live too far outside of town. And actually not too far from me, maybe 3.5 miles from me. And she told me, well, first of all, my friend said, Lance, when we started doing our show, he said, hey, my mother-in-law had an interesting encounter. And he kind of rolled his eyes, and he really didn't quite believe what he was getting ready to tell me. You can tell there. And so I said, no, well, okay, what was it? He said, well, she said, and I'll just back up a little bit. The mother-in-law works for them with their business. And so she gets up early in the morning, about 5 a.m., and she leaves out of her neighborhood. And where she lives is kind of a group of homes kind of clustered together, but there is some woods and patches of trees between this neighborhood and them before you start getting into the Broken Arrow city limits. And I would call this a bedroom community, really. That's what I call them. So she's pulling out, driving north, and when she pulls out to the right, there's a car in front of her. It's in the winter, and this, I think, occurred back in 2016. And so the car in front of her made a right, turning north on this blacktop road, and she followed kind of right in behind them because there was no traffic coming from the left, there from the south. And as she made her right, the car in front of her, she said, was a ways away, but not that far. As she could see, as she was driving north, the car in front of her, she noticed that something from the east was coming out of the periphery in her headlights. And as soon as she saw it, it was a huge gray silver wolf jumped over the back end of the car that was in front of her and landed on the other side of the road, this paved road, and just kept going. And it was heading off into a somewhat open field. The trees had been removed in this field, but it was still just a lightly patched of woods and kind of grasslands. I don't believe there's any cattle on it. But it was too dark to really see. Once it jumped over into the ditch, you couldn't see it from there because it was still early in the morning in the winter, and of course it's dark here. So she said, I don't even think the person in front even knew it because it was over the back end of the car, like over the trunk. And so it kind of blew her mind. And it was on all fours, and she never forgot it. And so, and privately, I questioned her, and she brought it up just like it was yesterday. And of course, this was some years ago, and she just said, Lance, I'm telling you, it was huge. Now, she has a very unique breed of dog, her and her husband. It's a 110-pound dog. He's just a lovable big giant. And the dog's name is Way Cool. And I said, okay, if you were comparing the size of that dog that you saw that jumped over the back end of that car in front of you when you turned right going north, coming out of that field, comparing it to the size of your 110-pound dog, how big, how many sizes or how big in comparison would you say that canine creature that you saw was? And she took a moment, she thought about it, she put her hands on her lips and was thinking, looking up. She said, about 3.5 times bigger. I said, what? She said, yes, about 3.5 times bigger. I said, so you're telling me your dog, Way Cool, weighs 110 pounds, and what you saw was 3 times bigger, 330, and then, so you're saying somewhere in the 360 category, 380, maybe even pushing 400 pounds? She said, yes, that's what I'm telling you. She said, it was massive. It's the biggest canine thing I've ever seen. It was huge, Lance. And what was interesting is when I was questioning her more about it, she says it happened in a flash, is that the homes that abut up against this field where it came out of is still kind of in a rough state. They've not really improved it yet for any homes being built back there, so it's just kind of a patch of grass and woods that head right onto the turnpike. And she said she was talking to a neighbor that was discussing some, just visiting on the street, and a neighbor had said that she saw, I think I saw the same thing. The back of my yard is open. I don't have a fence, and I can see it about every week at the same time. It's dragging something like a deer, and I just watch it. And this neighbor was kind of cavalier about it, like, yeah, I see it like every week. It's got something dead, and it's dragging it somewhere, and it's going in the direction that my friend's mother-in-law said that she saw it going, but it was dragging a deer or something. She just watches it, and I'm like, what? How do you stand there and watch something that's the biggest canine you've ever seen? I mean, and she never called anybody about it. She just watches it, So she told this lady I was talking to that had the eyewitness of this. So when I read this story here about this lady talking about what her husband, he had described when in front of his truck, it kind of reminded me of that story. And so I thought that was very interesting. And again, that only took place maybe about 3.5 miles from here in 2016. So I thought that was very interesting. So the next story that we have here, this is dated August 3rd, 2019. And it starts out here, greetings Lance, Lane, Bill, and the cryptid crew. To the point of value of your time, I ran across David Paulides' YouTube and 411 series 3 weeks ago and started listening to them about missing people from national parks. Many theories of what's going on or what's happening is still a mystery to me why all these people are missing. I heard the term Dogman, which stuck with me because of the experiences in the mid-late 1970s, which I'll tell you about it later. My name is such and such. I'm 57, of good character and conservative Christian faith. I was raised in Newton County, Missouri, Neosho to be exact. Our farm was such and such miles south and such miles west. Today, it's near the interstate, where interstate runs along what used to be our property line on the back side of the farm, where we lived 17 years as I was growing up, and several unexplained phenomena would occur without answers. Here's a short essay of the occurrences during the late to mid 1970s that I have accounted for. All of the following events happened from April to September during this 4-year period, 1974 to 1978. And this person starts off saying, young calves missing, some found mutilated and 90% eaten, and some never found. Same report from neighboring farms. Total calves from our farm missing was 5 in a 2-year period. The tracks we found around some of the mutilations were definitely canine with claws. However, we knew of no wild beast with that size of foot, not even a wolf, which we do not have in Missouri. The coyotes of the day back then were scroungy, mangy, gray-looking animal that wouldn't even come to your knee in height, and their footprints were the size of our hunting dogs or smaller, so we ruled that out. Visual sight of a large unidentified grayish to black beast in the field along the timberline on 3 occasions over a 3-year period. And he's put parentheses, mom, so I guess she recorded this out there, or during this time, his mother. Neighbors had a newborn calf locked in the barn with only the loft door open, which was roughly 15 feet to the opening from the outside ground. Was found missing, blood on the hay, and the mama cow found had large claw marks on her back and some were bleeding. The neighbors thought it may have been a cougar, but the evidence did not line up. We knew nothing else at the time to consider. We all knew it was something not to be reckoned with, and caution gripped the area for some time. In my mind, it was something else, but what? A friend of mine had an issue at his grandmother's house back in 1978 of a prowler around her house at night, usually between midnight and 4 a.m. She lived about 2.5 nautical miles from us with heavy to moderate timber and some open fields along the way. However, her home was on the road front, but on the edge of deep, undisturbed timber at the time. So-and-so thought it was someone messing around. So one day he brought a huge steel trap to shop class and welded spiked nails along the jaws and was going to trap the person causing the problem. And this person was serious. I went with him to set the traps outside of her home. One on the porch and a few around the perimeter close to the house under the windows because she said they would scratch the side of the house and on the windows trying to get her response. Best I remember, no one was caught, but 2 of the 4 traps were missing and never found. This is what was interesting when I read that. In 1977, me and my brothers had a church function on a Friday night that left Mom alone at home. A brave, faith-filled woman my mom was. She was of good character and not easily fooled. When we arrived home, we got home to a wide eye and kind of shook up Mother. She said, "Boys, I want you to be careful out there from now on." This was all kind of a surprise to us because nothing really upset our mother. She continued to unfold the events that had all of us scared to stay home alone at the house anymore. She said around 9:30 p.m., something would make a noise in the yard and bang against the house. But the beagles were dead silent and stayed away from the house, and the 2 coonhounds would not come out of their dog houses and would not bark. My mother looked out the window a few times, she said, but did not see anything. She only felt a deep, dreadful aura about the house. She was already praying, but when the doorknobs began to turn like someone was trying to get in, she began pleading the blood of Jesus and rebuking everything on earth, she said. That's when whatever it was went to the back door and tried the doorknob there. Now, the back of the house faced north, with an open field just about 200 yards from a very thick and ghostly timberline, and had a sense and has since been gone with the new Interstate 49 that came in. Mom said she thought it may have been a creepy old man that lived in the area, but he lived a good quarter of a mile away and would have to walk over a mile by the road or through the field and that ghostly timberline to get to the house. Plus, the dogs would have been all over him, but they were scared silly, and this was not normal if it was a human. So we dismissed that it was the creepy old man. We had honestly no explanation what Mom was talking about. We've had loud, unexplained bangs on the house and building during this 4-year period with no answers as to what was causing these bangs. Our 80-acre farm was a half-mile long and a quarter-mile wide rectangle, and the home was right in the middle, so anyone trying to foul play would have to have guts to do so. Nothing was ever found out as to what went on that night. In 1976 and 77, my brothers and myself had horses, and we would ride them everywhere. Along the west perimeter of the north half of the farm, which was deep, brushy 80 acres of timber in which we had a very well-worn path cutting through to our friend's house many times, but it was kind of spooky riding through there and walking through these woods. But it was our playground, if you will, growing up, and we knew every inch of these woods. There were 3 times when entering these woods from our back field, the horses reared up, danced around, shook like an earthquake, and would not go in the woods. We would get off our horses and try leading them in on the trail, but they would rear back and refuse to go another step. One time they broke away and ran back to the house, leaving us there. That's when we could feel this deep aura, if you will, that feeling of dread that came over us. Without a word, we hauled it back to the house, wishing we would have been more in tune with the horse's perception. We saw nothing, though. One other time, we were riding our horses and made it through our playground timber, if you will, and across a field into 120-acre timber that we had trails all through that our neighbor owned. We were on one of the trails that led down a ravine to a big spring. The horses revolted and wouldn't go another step, so we got off and started leading them. They would rear up, stomp, dance around, snort. As we broke over the ridge and started down the ravine, this horrible feeling again and fear came over us. And then we saw it. A deer was laying at the bottom of this ravine, literally ripped up from head to toe and half eaten. I've never seen such a large blood pattern strewn around a kill like that in my life, nor an animal so mutilated. It just wasn't a normal kill. The tracks were a huge dog track because you could see the claws, and that's why we knew it wasn't a cat. We hauled it back out of there and took the back road to the house, even though it was a mile longer ride. We had had enough timber activity, and with all this, we began to add up that there's something out there and we don't want to meet it. Late summer of 1977, my brother was going to our neighbors to the northwest of us, and as usual, he would cut through our playground timber to cut a mile off the trip. I was driving by this time and had gone into town and was back within an hour. When I got home, I noticed my younger brother was home, but acting a little odd or strange. I asked Mom if he was okay, and she said he ran into a wolf and barely made it home unscathed. This alarmed me. After all, the backlog of events and running through my mind kept rolling like a never-ending movie of all the things that we've seen and heard. So I went to the back bedroom and I asked him if he was all right. He just sat there on the bed, white as a sheet, and said, "Yeah, I think so, yeah." He's a guy typically a few words, so it was hard to get it out of him to even talk. Eventually he said he ran into a wolf back in the timber. I said, "You know we don't have wolves in Missouri. There's not enough habitat for them to be a resident." He said, No, this wasn't a wolf." My blood ran cold, but kind of sloughed it off a little bit because, those are in the movies to scare people and make believe. You know that. But he just sat there, just with this long stare. Long story short, we never ever went into those woods again, and we sold the farm and moved out of state in May of 1979 because of Dad's job. 22 years later, in 2001, I moved back to Newton County, Missouri. 7 years ago, I bought a small farm, such and such miles east of Neosho, in the Monarch Springs, Sark City, and Sweetwater area. If you drew a box representing a square mile and then drew a line straight through the middle of that box representing a road, our house is the only house on that road just north of the center in the middle of that square mile. Totally surrounded by patches of timber, ponds, a cemetery, and overgrown fences, and some pastures. We see all kinds of native wildlife, deer, coon, rabbits, fox, bobcats galore, and coyotes by the millions. I raise Jacob sheep, and at one time I had a herd of 70, and I've raised over 200, and I sell a bunch each year. I only have 10 at the moment for various reasons, being predation. The coyotes around here are not like the ones in the 1970s on the farm where I grew up. These are stealthy, red wolf-looking canines able to take down a younger calf. They howl off every night, some coming right into the yard. They have no fear after dark. They are a beautiful animal, but I do not want them that close to the house. Over the past 5 years, I've lost baby sheep to bald eagles and other predators. However, I have lost adult sheep too, some totally missing with no trace, and others killed and left laying in the field uneaten but dead. The 8 adult sheep over the past 5 years that were killed left me scratching my head. Their neck would be bitten with about 6 to 10 inch spread in width between the two sides of the jaws of the animal killing them. I would find the crushed vertebra, one at the base of the neck and the other just behind the head, about 6 to 10 inches in the width, with no other bite marks, no other wounds found. They would have all the wool scraped off the side facing up where they lay, with no skin broken, just huge claw marks on the exposed skin, larger than my hand. Now these sheep are known for the amount of lanolin they produce, and on the adults it's very bitter. Usually the predators will not eat them very soon after death until the wolf all falls off from decay. I have had adult sheep die and would not be bothered by predators for weeks. The yearling sheep do not have this bitter lanolin and are taken easily by predators. These adult deaths puzzle me, but also kind of scare me. What was it with such a bite and such wide claw marks totally pulling off all of the wool down to the bare smooth skin, and leave wide claw marks, but do not break the skin? The skin would be covered with lanolin like spreading mayonnaise on it. It was always during the spring and summer when this would occur. The coyotes, I noticed, would disappear in May and June and come back around September-ish. I thought this quite strange. I would not so much as hear a yelp from one during this time. Yet that's when these adult deaths would happen. My thoughts are that a larger predator moved into the area during this time, and my observation kind of support that theory. In late spring of 2016, I was on my way home from work around 4 p.m. on such and such road that leads home. 2 frantic deer come busting across the field out of a wooded ravine, and I saw the first one cross the road right in front of me. Then, out of nowhere, the second one clears the fence and ditch and lands in the road right in front of my bumper. And I hit it, and the deer flies and lands just about 5 feet by the line pole off the road, dead. I got out to take a look at the deer, but a dreadful feeling came over me as soon as I stepped out of my car. Something wasn't right here. What spooked the deer in such a manner that they would be running so carelessly, especially right in front of me? This has happened before where deer come out, but not like this. Something was different. They were definitely spooked. So I got back in the car. I was able to drive home before the car overheated. I had some problems with it, and I knew it was going to heat over quickly if I didn't get home, and I did not want to be stranded out there. The next day, on the way home, I stopped to check out the deer that I had killed, but all that was left was the lower rear hock, a small 8-inch section of the backbone, and part of the jaw. I mean, the deer was devoured right there where it landed, just 5 feet off the road. Again, a feeling of fear and dread came over me, and I thought, now this is the second time this has occurred. This is very strange that I had this feeling, and that this deer wasn't drug off and eaten like most wild resident animals would have done. The timber that bordered the road in that spot is very, very thick and underbrushy, and the deer are always jumping in the road at that location. August 2017. While on the way to work at 3 a.m., I passed by my neighbor's home, and a huge, I do not know what, animal came running out into the road from the barn lot, looked at me with headlight amber eyes, and continued crossing the road at breakneck speed. On the way home that evening, I thought I should stop and tell my neighbor what I saw that came out of his barn lot that borders his yard, not but 100 feet from where this beast came out in front of me. I told my neighbor, and he said that he had lost 2 young calves without a trace within the past 2 weeks, and he thanked me for telling him about that incident. 4 days later, on my way back to work at around 3 a.m., about 1/8 of a mile west of my neighbor's barn lot and home, a massive beast, grayish-black in color, just like the first encounter, runs across the road in front of me. It looks in my direction with huge spotlight amber eyes, just booking it. I quickly turned my car 90% to the north to follow this animal across the field, but it was gliding over the northbound fence of that field about 300 yards from the road. It had to be running somewhere, I estimate, around 60 miles an hour to cover that much ground that quick. I'd never seen anything so fast. A couple of days later, I stopped to see my neighbor and tell him of my second encounter, and he said that he had lost 2 more calves since the last time we spoke. I did not tell my neighbor what I thought it was. I didn't know for sure, so I passed it off to him as a big cat. During this time each summer, we would start losing cats, dogs in the neighborhood. We lost 3 dogs and 15 cats during a 5-year period, as well as 12 chickens, 30 guineas, 12 turkeys, and 4 ducks. Another thing I've noticed during the past few years, right before the coyotes disappear, you will hear them doing their nightly yapping, but there will be a much different one close by, but not with them, howling in a much lower, robust, and multi-tone growl that raises the hair on your neck. This year it happened just about 100 yards from the house, about the first week of June. I could feel the vibration of its lowness all over my body, and the force of it was very alarming. It literally stopped me, and I stood there in a daze. Whatever it was probably watching me, because it was in the tree line of the overgrown ravine just to the south of the dairy barn where I was standing. And it was just dusk, but not totally dark outside yet. This was the closest to the house it's been in the past years, but it's always just before the coyotes disappear for a few months. I listened to a recording of a Dogman howling from one of yours or another YouTube show yesterday, and it scared me to death because It was almost exactly the sound of the one that I had heard at the farm over the past few years. Okay, so all these experiences I've written to say that they seem to follow a pattern. I've heard on shows like yours and others. What got me to thinking about this whole issue is one of your Oklahoma Encounter shows of a man that was in Grove and Bernice, Oklahoma areas, and he gave a story. That's only about 40 miles from where I live now, and there are some wicked things that seem is going on in this Grove area of Oklahoma and near the Lake Uchi area and Disney, Oklahoma. I have only seen this animal crossing the road in front of me twice and a couple of times in the field at the cemetery. It's tall enough to be mistaken as a young calf, but I lost that theory of it being a calf one day when it crossed the pasture from the timber, and then I saw it. It had crossed the road. It was in the other field leading to the timber west of us. I've never seen it on 2 feet, only running, oddly, on all fours. It had a different run to it, but again was extremely fast. I first thought a hyena, but that was more than I could process at the time. It's not a bear, nor a big cat. Others have seen it at a distance, but will not comment as to their take on it. After hours and hours of YouTube listening, devouring these encounter stories of Dogman creatures, I'm now of the belief that there just might be one foraging the area here from time to time. I've yet to confirm this, but my eyes are now open more than ever. I do not believe we have a resident beast in the area, but definitely one that likes to vacation here for the summer. If it is a Dogman, it keeps a low profile, unlike the stories of areas where they take up more permanent resident and defend it. At any case, being an outdoorsman and seeing many things from the wild all my life, I've only written about the ones that do not line up with the normal native habits of this area. I've always had an open case on all these stories with no concrete answers. Your show may have given me just the answers of possibility I need. I will not say until more evidence and proof can support some of these encounters. It does give me a base in which to start, though. I'm one that won't call it a bird without feathers in my hand, but I don't walk stupidly with the evidence I already have. Just need more evidence to support the facts. I still have all my kids at home, ages 12 to 20. I have strict rules about walking the road during the day and about being outside at night. It's so beautiful here in our private valley of springs and rolling hills, being the only house on this mile stretch of road, but I'm cautious of the unexpected, be it a roaming human or wild animal, as secluded as we are. We have neighbors, but you can't see any of our neighbors from our property. The road we live on begins to look like an old logging road, but during the summer, because of no traffic, it's a named county road. The county calls it the such and such road, even though it runs for several miles and it's nice and wide everywhere, but the miles we live on because we are the only home on this mile section and we love every minute of it. Okay, he's saying here, but basically the road runs for miles and miles, and they're the only home in this section. I'm sharing this for you and your brothers and others to add to your collection of where Dogman may be if you're mapping out its range. I'm not 100% positive, but evidence leads to the pattern that these beasts seem to follow. I've yet to confirm its bipedal trait, as I've not seen any of these creatures walking upright, but it seems every time that I see them, it's on all fours. I need a close enough visual of its profile to account for this, but I'm always on the lookout. To my knowledge, no Bigfoot are in the area. At one time during the 1970s, there was a scare west of Neosho close to Oklahoma, but never heard about it anymore. As new evidence comes to light, I will keep you posted. Thank you for your time. Sincerely, Mr. So-and-so. So, this was really interesting. This gentleman here, again, this was August 3rd in 2019, he sent this to me. And, you know, this is what happens a lot of times is people when listening to these shows, and they'll either come across our show or other shows almost by accident. I think they'll come across just for people for the first time looking for a YouTube show, and they come across these, and then they're hooked because they hear people just like them, and it provides a source of entertainment. But what happens is that people in the rule setting, they start to, as I say, connect the dots. They start putting the pieces of the puzzle together. And when they hear these stories, and they've always had these events or incidents happen going way back in their childhood, and they just kind of brushed it off, even if they had a sighting, but it was still questionable what they saw. They just kind of brushed it off. It wasn't an up-close sighting, and they were in a relatively safe environment or distance, be that is in their car or in their home, something like that. They weren't walking on the road or something. So they just kind of brush it off, and then when they come across these stories, all of a sudden these dots start to connect, and that's what seemed like really connected here. Although there's some very strange encounters here. This occurred again from 1974 to 1978. And what's interesting is that, this gentleman appears to be, he's in his 50s. He has a family. He's used to growing up in the farm. And that really sets the context for this, because that's one of the things, and I'm glad he put that in there. I always, why we set the context prior to a story or during or after is that if you grow up on a farm, over time what things sound like, look like. You begin to know the animal sounds. And so if you hear enough of normal, abnormal just sticks out. And that's the case in this here too. So I'm glad this gentleman really talked about the childhood growing up on the farm. Unfortunately, some of the events happened during his childhood, but I can't imagine the part where his brother had an encounter. I don't think his brother, he didn't elaborate. I looked here in this story. It doesn't say here that the brother talked about his encounter anymore. He just said that he sat there on the bed and said that he came across... He just said that he came in contact with a wolf. He ran into a wolf back in the timber. And he was trying to tell his brother. He was kind of scared, but he was trying to tell his brother, there's no wolves here. And he just said, then the next thing he said, I'm looking here at the story again. He said, no, this was not a wolf. It was, and he said here, and I missed this. He said, no, this wasn't a wolf. This was a werewolf. Interesting. I read it so fast here, I just missed that. He said it wasn't a wolf, it was a werewolf. And that's when my blood ran cold, and it kind of sloughed off a bit because, he said, those are only in the movie to scare people and make believe. Long story short, we never went back into those woods again. We sold the farm and moved out of state in May of 1979 because of Dad's job. So, this was back in Missouri, so there's so many of these sightings around, folks. You don't want to put a lot of fear into people or anything. That's not what this show is intended for. I just want to educate people that these creatures are real. They're out there. To what level they're dangerous, I can't answer that. But we know they have the ability to be dangerous on how they are, how they look, how they're shaped, and being a predator. Most predators, their eyes are in front, and the old saying, eyes in front hunt, eyes to the side hide. And with the size of teeth, their ability to move and strength, and their intellect, we just don't know. It's very scary based on some of these encounters. We just don't understand, but that's a scary part as well. So that's it for tonight, guys. Be safe out there. Take care. Good night.